Welcome back to TT Plays. This is a first for me when it comes to Grand Archive, but I am honored and privileged to have a Silvie main in the building.
Hey,
Trent, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Trent and I officially met when we played in the first round of the True Champion Gaming. What do we want to call it? Banned and restricted update mini tournament.
21-hour stream.
Yeah. Whatever they call it. And basically, I had to wake up at 5 in the morning, sleeve a deck, and then we played. And you beat me with Exodia, Sylvie. But we had a great conversation from it. It was a ton of fun. And I've been thinking about trying to get a little more information in deck techs. And I was like, you know what? Let's talk about Sylvie. And I couldn't think of anyone better to have on. So Trent, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, by the way. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, that was a great time playing in that tournament. It was a total blast, and I had never met you before, and then we chatted for a while after. It was a great time.
Yeah, I agree. It was cool. I'm thankful for the boys to invite me. And yeah, it was really great to meet you. I only got to play one round. I know you got through two rounds. They didn't do one this
Barely.
time. They've talked about doing one for alchemical, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, I hope that they do. I actually had a really great time watching the stream and seeing everybody else play too. I will say, by the time we got to round two, I was struggling to stay awake. I was like doing math wrong. I'm sitting there. I'm like, does this kill the guys? Oh no, it doesn't. So it was tough. So I think, I guess having a better idea of how it runs would be nicer.
Yeah, but that was some of the glory of it, right? It's
Oh yeah.
beautiful imperfections. It was kind of like the improv comedy of an online Grand Archive tournament. So I could at least appreciate it for what it was. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Silvie today. And I think my first question to you is, what does Silvie do well? Silvie is obviously the only three-level tamer. We
Hmm.
have the secondary, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So we don't see a lot of Silvie. When I log on the Lux map, it's pretty rare for them to pop up. So what do you think Silvie does well, Trent?
So I actually think Sylvie does a really great job of playing a defensive game. I think that she ends up forcing the game to go really long if she gets to her third. Well, it depends on which champion you're playing too, right? There's a starter deck Sylvie who's more going for a long game, and then there's the Earth's Tune Sylvie who's more going for like the combo win or just going back to card advantage or card parity at least. So it's she's modal, right? Like I think that's really the draw is that you can kind of play her in any way that you want.
So that sounds great. But we already kind of buried the lead here that we don't see a lot of her. So
That's
what
true.
does Sylvie struggle with? Because like a modal, controlling, defensive, that sounds amazing. But obviously something's going on here, right? So why do you think we don't see more Sylvies out there?
I think a lot of it is that there wasn't really a lot of room for her in the beginning, and we've seen, I think, a big resurgence of Sylvie in the more recent meta because I think that there's more room for her to be explored. I will say, I think that ultimately she struggles with card advantage. She has what seems like great tools on paper, like level up and draw two, but it's almost never draw two, and it's usually draw zero.
When it's draw two, it feels great though.
Oh, it feels amazing. Like I built the whole deck that I was playing to just draw two on level two.
For those of you who don't know, level two Sylvie, Sylvie with the pack, right? Obviously costs two to materialize, Sylvie lineage. If you control an animal ally, draw a card. New sentence. If you control a beast ally, draw a card. So if you happen to control something that's an animal and a beast, we'll double dip there. We'll get to draw two cards. And like Trent kind of alluded to, if it comes back to your turn and you control nothing, then you don't draw any cards. And that's a horrible, horrible feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the real feels bad moment when they're like kill your stuff, and then they say okay, pass the turn. I actually think that she benefits a lot from those dungeon guide plays because like ideally you want to go squirrel, gray wolf, dungeon guide all on the same turn and draw two cards, and then leveling up was free. But that, like I said, that's super rare. Now we're looking at having to draw exactly three cards out of your deck, like as a combo. It's a little tough.
So, do any of the tamer cards out there help with this card disadvantage you kind of are mentioning at. I mean, the one I think of is the Terror card, obviously, right? That just basically draws you a card every turn, but we have to make it there. We have to not die. But are they running anything else that you think is above rate or helps with that card equilibrium?
Oh, for sure. So once Sylvie gets to the late game, she has Gaia's Blessing available to her, which that is you get to play animals or beasts off the top of your library or your deck rather. So you get to play Gaia Songbird for one from your hand, and then it goes and looks for a beast and puts it into your hand. So it like was free kind of. I've gone from having 2 cards in hand to 5 allies and 4 cards in hand, just off of Gaia's Blessing alone.
And I know obviously they just got the new Proxima card, Stone Scale Band. Looting isn't inherently card advantage, right? But
Correct.
what do we think of the band, right? Can we get rid of like early game beasts, for lack of a better term, and try to dig for late game cards?
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the best parts about the band is that you get to level up, and then you get to play the band on the next turn, discarding some beasts and allies out of your memory or your hand, and then you get to get rid of the 4 of them from your graveyard in order to bring out Gaia's Blessing. So you kind of get them both in the same turn, which is awesome. And then you can activate the Stone Scale Band and just start casting stuff off the top of your deck at instant speed. So it is very good, and it leads to a lot of good combat tricks, especially with Bedivere.
Okay, cool. And we'll get into that a little more. I think I got a little off the rail here. So,
Yeah.
what do we think of her appeal? When I think of like people say simping, I'm an old man. I don't really understand what that means, but like Merlin simps all the time. I hear that. That's cool. And I feel like Sylvie is right there. I feel like Sylvie is like maybe even eclipsing Merlin of like people want it to work. They're pulling for it to work. They're digging deep into the deck building bag to figure something out here. So what do we think the appeal is of Sylvie?
Oh, for sure. I mean, she's the underdog, right? Like, she's not even a champion of the Grand Archive, according to the lore. She just accidentally got isekai'd into this world.
That's a
Uh,
great point.
so, like, I think it's really cool. That was the original draw for me. Is that like, hey, it's the accidental champion. Let's try playing that. And it was the first starter deck I ever played. I think that's most people's experience too, and why they like seeing Sylvie work. It's also because you don't see her in a lot of these meta breakdowns. That people are like, there's got to be something there, and they want to discover it too.
You think it's just like a little underdog syndrome?
Oh, I think so. Yeah,
Okay. That
but I
makes sense.
also
And dogs are animals, right? So it's all coming together here.
yeah, I think it's also like she just it's there's an appeal there to like where they're starting to come up with new cards for her. Like some of the new spoiler cards are really good. So I think that there's the potential for a lot. So people wanting to get used to it more now as well before ALC drops.
So Trent, I know you're a pretty competitive player or like competitive casual. I don't know how you want to label yourself.
Competitive casual.
Okay, so I do think before we kind of go into Sylvia a little more, and I know I kind of buried the lead there, I think it'd be good for us to step back and talk about how you see the meta, because I think how we see the meta really tells about what decks are going to be successful, because then we better understand why. So, how do you view the current meta?
So right now, I think the meta is really healthy. Ever since the bans, I think that we're not seeing like the pot of greed looping combos that we were, where it's like, hey, you drew 18 cards and I lost the game. It's more like a lot of back and forth card advantage, and so I think that there's a lot there for getting long term value out of cards. That's why we see Water Allies doing so well lately. We see the Water Allen list that Jeff's posted recently do very well. And I think that those are all based around the same idea of just incremental advantage and tempo control. And I think Sylvie does that really well. I think that Lorraine does Wind Allies extremely well. And, I haven't seen much Rye lately, but he's there for sure.
Yeah, right. Like you're gonna like 1 out of 20 people or something is gonna play Rye, and if you're
Yeah,
not ready for it, you're gonna die on turn three. And one of my locals, like a new person showed up and they just died. And like, how do we beat this deck? It's the best deck. I'm like, you just play creatures and turn them sideways. Just
yeah,
play allies and turn them sideways, and you'll probably get there. But if you're not ready for it, it can feel horrible.
true.
So we've got these basically value decks. We have kind of the tall value decks in Merlin 3, right? And we
Hmm.
different flavor, kind of flavor to taste. We have the mid-range value decks in like wind or water allies. And I like what you said in like aggro tempo or aggro control. That's what Fire Lorraine has felt like to me, right? Where they're able to, in a world full of allies, they're able to control the board and then present really explosive damage when it's time to apply pressure, right? So it feels to me as a novice Tamer player the people teching for wide ally teams inadvertently clips Silvie rather hard. Am I mistaken there?
No, that's absolutely true. She takes a lot of collateral damage from like every direction. It's they'll usually print a new card, and it's like, hey, this works really well against this, and also it makes Sylvie worse. But yeah, it's nice like that. It's so it's such a wide open meta that there's still an opportunity for her to succeed, as we saw with Jeff's list as well recently.
All right. And one of the unique things Sylvie brings is obviously Terra. We talked a little bit about a couple Terra cards here. We kind of bounced around, but can you give us a high level overview of the pros and cons of Terra? Because a lot of people's introduction to, for lack of a better term, advanced elements are like, again, I played against Rye, I've seen Arcane, and then I've played against Crux. I don't really know what happened if I'm a new player. They just drew a whole bunch of cards.
Yeah, so Terra is like big beasts, and with Virtus you have explosive damage. It like I think that it can fit a wide variety of different scenarios. Like for example, uh, the Opus, the I forget what it's called, but the
Artificer's
Artificer's
Opus?
Opus, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one. So
Four
that
eight, 4/8 enters the field rested, efficiency cleave, which is
yeah,
absolutely bonkers.
yeah, so like a lot of people have been talking about that in the let's make Sylvie playable thread. And it's if you can put that in at their end step with the stone scale band, then it comes in awake on your turn and you get to just cleave their whole board down. So like things like that, and I've used Arima to great effect against Xander decks, which tend to be slower, and they can't deal with your board unless they have Excalibur, which you can then also use Anthem to make your things have Spell Shroud. So like there's a lot of like versatility there because Arima when it's a 12/12 is unkillable.
Yeah, literally unkillable. It just goes back in your
Yeah, it
memory.
just goes back to your memory. So yeah, I think there's a lot of versatility there.
So then, do you agree with the assessment that Terra is more fair than Crux or some of the advanced elements?
I think that that's yes, but it's also comparing apples and oranges. I think that like
Fair.
in the sense of the game, like yes, I suppose so. Um, but I do think that there's like I think that it has benefits over some of the Crux cards too. Like Ghost of Pendragon's a great card, absolutely phenomenal. Draws two cards, pays for itself. Metal Bloom Dryad is underrated. That card is incredible too. Every creature that you cast, you put a buff counter on an ally. That makes some stuff get really out of control very quickly.
Yeah, it also brings in something we kind of alluded to before, which is Tamer has a few interesting, quote unquote, unique mechanics. One of them being Preserve. And Preserve is basically when this card would hit your graveyard, depending on where it came from, right? Instead, it's preserved and it's put in your material deck instead. And instead of materializing, you can basically draw that card back up. It's not technically a draw, you place it in your hand, but
Right, and it's also not a materialize either, so it gets around the domains of Camelot, Avalon, and Vuruk. So you get to just bring the card from your material deck back to your hand, which is nice. I don't think that's ever come up yet, but it's there, so it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, like cards like Terrasite, for example, like that's it's playing a different game than Crux is. Crux is very much the like instant card advantage or instant card parity, like more explosive on the front end, and Terra is very like slow on the back end in order to get card advantage eventually. But I
yeah,
think
and
that also that plays more towards Sylvie strategies too.
yeah, and Terrasite then is a preserve and it's just a fast zero cost draw card, right? Which makes sense. So,
Hmm.
like you said, this long term is going to outvalue Kingslayer, but it's definitely not nearly as explosive as Avarice was or something like Pendragon.
Correct. Yeah. And it's also, it takes up your material step every turn too. So it's like you're getting a GCR every turn for free, which is kind of nice. But it's still a spell you have to cast.
All right, so we've kind of given a high level overview at this stage of kind of where we think the meta is, kind of where Silvie is at, and then we've got basically the important choice here. Well, I think there's more than three choices here. Wait, we have wind, fire, and water. And would you agree that we have to decide whether we're going to be a Terra deck or not, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There's a lot of Sylvie decks that don't end up going to Terra.
So, what do you think the pros and cons are for going to Terra? Like, what would make you say, I want to keep this deck out of Terra versus diving into it?
I think it depends on the overall strategy of the deck. Like, there's the Dawn of Ashes deck that I played against you in the tournament. That you want to go to Terra as fast as possible because that's where all of your card advantage lies. Like, the heart of the deck and the card advantage engine is on the Terra side. A lot of other decks, like the Wind Allen or Water Allen deck that recently did well, is very value oriented on the lower end. So you're trading card for card early, and then you're using like Bestial Frenzy and Capricious Links to sweep their board when you get behind.
Okay. So, we have time to pretty much go over like one deck, kind of one idea. Where do you want to take us here, Trent?
Um, I mean, I we could talk about melodies and harmonies. That was a deck that I was working on recently. We could talk about the Dawn of Ashes, the card advantage engine. What would you like to talk about?
Melodies and harmonies sound amazing. So let's go ahead and talk about that, right? Those are
Sure.
subclasses of a card type, correct?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you're
So
trying to build a deck around these?
there is a card called Wild Heart Lyre, and it's a Tamer instrument that you can materialize for one. And then every time it's reservable, so you can use it like a fractal. And every time that you rest it and you pay for a song or a melody or harmony, rather, you put a buff counter on an ally that you control, or an animal or beast ally that you control. So trying to abuse that is doing things like Song of Nurturing on their turn, and then you get to buff an animal, or Song of Frost ending combat and then buffing an animal. So the whole point of the deck is to just do like a lot of buffing of the animals. So you have like a 1/3 that suddenly becomes like a 3/6 slowly, and like that becomes unkillable almost.
Okay, and Lyre obviously then brings us to water. Water opens up Scepter, right? Which is,
Yep,
I think we both agree, a very above rate card.
card's great.
Okay, yeah, can confirm. So if we're gonna play water, let's jam Scepter in there. What do we think of Alan, who we haven't spoken of yet? Alan is obviously the level 2 offshoot. He the equivalent of what Merlin is, if you haven't looked at it before. 22 health, cost 2, on enter glimpse 3. Then reveal the top card of your deck. If that card is a harmony or melody, you can put it into your hand. And then as long as you control 2 or more animals and slash or beast allies, Alan gets +2 level. So it's pretty easy for him to be level 4/5.
Hmm.
And he seems to have a good harmony or excuse me, synergy.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think Alan's great. A lot of people he saw a lot of success in DOA in erupting decks because erupting is a harmony,
Mhm.
and so you would just Ember Song, and then you could get either half of your combo using Alan, and then he'd also buff your levels. So it's just conveniently on rate for erupting Rhapsody. In the deck that's more like the Wild Heart Lyre song harmony one, it's you're using him to get not card advantage but card like selection when you level up, and then you're using the innervate knowledge to de-level, and then when you can level back up afterwards, you get rid of the downside because you're running so many harmonies and melodies that you're gonna draw a card essentially off of it. So it's like it's you're kind of using the scepter in that way, but you're also getting advantage because you're using the melodies and harmonies as well as a lyre.
So in a deck like this, would you consider running Alan and level 2 Sylvie so you can kind of bounce in and out depending on what you need?
I have thought about it, and it's so tough to fit that like one extra card in the material deck. I can't find room for it, but I would love to.
Okay, so we're just running Alan for this deck. So we're Wind, we're Alan, we're running Lyre, we're running Scepter. We've got Water, Sylvie, and Alan, so that brings up to 5 cards. I
Hmm.
assume we're running what I consider the Tamer Triumphant, right? Something like Ears, Paws, and a Flute.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we've got to toss a GCR in there. We don't sound like a Quicksilver deck, right?
Yep. Correct.
And then we have to just bring meta cards after that, right?
Yeah, I think in my deck I ended up running sort of Seeking just as a meta call because if Lunette sticks to the board, you lose the game.
Very fair. That is a fair assessment. Just allowing Sylvia Island to get in there. We probably run a Null Lantern again because if we let Fire run rampant, Fire will run rampant. And then, believe it or not, we only have one slot left after that, Trent, which is probably why you're not playing level 2 Sylvie.
Correct.
Okay. And that one slot could be any number of things you're worried about in your local meta, anything, right? We could do Terrafring, we could do Tithe Proclamation. There's a bunch of things we can
hmm
put in there.
Yeah, I've even thought about putting Bauble of Abundance for the extra card draw and to disbalance the opponents if they're running water as well.
Oh, that could be spicy.
It's pretty good against
Yeah. No,
Lunette.
that's great. It's another way to slow down Lunette, right? You attack, you get the one
hmm
damage on her, then you pop the bobble and she dies due to state based.
Yep.
Yeah, I like it. That's some hot tech right there. Okay, so let's run through the deck real quick here. Can you go through the melodies and harmonies that you think are worth considering?
Sure. Song of Frost, that card is incredible. Ask any Fire Lorraine player what card they hate the most, and it's this one. I've stopped many Rending Flames with it. Card's phenomenal. And if you're casting it off of the Lyre, you get to stop combat and buff a guy. It's amazing. Song of Nurturing is probably number 3. I think
Okay.
Blissful Calling is actually a little bit better in this deck than Song of Nurturing because it's just you pay the one cost, you get a card back, and you're paying for it with the Lyre. So it's just cycle this card and buff one of my allies.
Yeah, so
Um,
Blissful Calling, for those of you who don't know, is like look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You can reveal an animal, beast, put it into your hand, the rest on bottom. So it costs 1. Like Trent said, it replaces itself, but you've gotten this buff counter out in the field, which is obviously what we're trying to do here.
yep. And the Song of Nurturing is very good too. I've used it to save a couple of creatures. If you can get the Wild Heart Lyre with Song of Nurturing, it's really good for combat tricks. Being able to buff your Bedivere and you're pumping it with the Song of Nurturing is like, oh, surprise, your guy's going to take 3 damage as retaliation.
Yeah, so allies you control get +2 toughness, and then class bonus, they'll get +1 attack as well. Not to mention, again, that buff counter you mentioned. So basically, we're going +2/+3 on a single creature and +1/+2 on the board,
Yep.
which is a huge swing.
Oh, it's huge. And especially because this is a go wide strategy too. And you're also buffing your lurking assailants on those turns, which when they can
Oh,
then
great point.
retaliate as well.
Okay, so that's I'm assuming we're just running 4 of those. That gets us to 12. Is that enough? I feel like we probably want more if we're planning to always hit with Alan, right?
Yeah, I only run one mist resonance in there as well. It's just the 4 and then 4 of each of those and then the one mist resonance. But I've never whiffed with Alan because you usually don't level up
Why
until
would you say
you're
that out loud, Trent?
you usually don't whiff with Alan because you're like you don't level up until way later in the game, and by that point there probably isn't that many cards left like that you haven't looked at yet.
Yeah, so that's a great piece of information you just gave there that people will probably miss if they just look at your deck on Silvie here. So, like, what is the play pattern for this deck? Because obviously the deck list is down here in the YouTube comments. Like, you said you're going to level up late. Cool. What are the signals you're looking for to level up? What is the early play pattern? What does your materialization pattern look like?
So generally, it's I'll play either Dewdrop Hairs early just to get them out there. I'll level up to Sylvie level 1 almost every time, every turn 1, no matter what. If I have to, I'll
Before
drop
Scepter?
a yeah. And actually, the reason for that is I find that if I go straight to Scepter and then I try and level up into Sylvie, I'm so far behind at that point that like even if I drop a Bedivere as a 2/5 off the Sylvie buff, it's too far gone. Like the game is already
Okay.
out of my control.
Okay.
Um, Being able to drop the hairs and then you can de-level later and then re-level back up and then drop another hairs or drop that Bedivere that you wanted. You get the benefit of them being a 2/4 on board, which is pretty good for 2. So you also still have combat tricks. And most of the time, people can't clear a 4 toughness creature with 1 attack. So Give Bath is on double duty there. So it gives you the float that you want in order to pull out the rest of your, like the Scepter, for example, or the Wild Heart Lyre on the next turn. I try and get the Lyre out ASAP. Like probably the turn after I became Silvie.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, the deck is built around the theoretical liar value. Let's start grinding the values as early as we can.
Yep.
Scepter is a great piece here, but we're more looking for Scepter to close, right, with 4 to 8 unexpected damage or 5 to draw a couple cards.
Yep, correct. Yeah, most of the time I actually don't even get the damage off of it. It's I'll put it out there as Sylvie level 1, and then I'll either never level up to Alan or I'll use it to close the game.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. So then we're just trying to find those early favorable trades. When we think the board settles out, we're gonna go into just like Harmony Liar mode.
Yeah, like the best thing that you can do is get a Bedivere online and then start buffing it. And by the time that the opponent has like can deal with it, because you're still running Songs of Frost and Song of Nurturing as well. By the time that they can deal with it, you've got a Frosthorn Paladin on board or Lurking Assailants as backup. So you're just trying to slow the game down as much as possible, so that you can continually buff one creature, and then eventually you'll drop a Fervent Beast Caller with a beast on board, and that should seal the deal.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to sleeve the deck up. I told my locals I'm gonna start. Our store championship's over, so it's kind of like time to explore. So I'm trying to play Tamer for at least
Oh
four
heck
weeks in a
yeah!
row. So I'm excited to check this out. There might have been some ulterior motive in having you on the pod here, the video. So I'm excited about it. Is there anything in closing you want to say about the deck here? Anything you think maybe should be considered that just didn't make it into this list iteration?
Yeah, I really would like to find room for Frostbind. I think you can probably cut Give Bath for Frostbind, or maybe Stalwart Shieldmate. The Shieldmate's kind of mid. I couldn't think of anything else to put in the slot, and I was like really hesitant to run Frostbind because I don't really like running counter spells. I'm also there, for the opponent's enjoyment as well. But that said, I think that Frostbind makes the deck very, very potent.
Okay. Yeah, I think we could definitely find. Yeah, I think even just like two frostbinds, like once your opponent knows you're playing it right, they have to play around it. Keeps them way more honest, right?
I will tell you, I did not run Frostbind in this deck, and just by holding 3 cards in my hand, I was able to like fake Frostbind for the opponent the entire tournament. They would never cast anything without having extra cards in their hand. So it's almost like by not running it, you just make the opponent discard 2 cards,
Like, yeah, you're representing Song of Nurturing, and
and
they
they think
choose
it's
not to
Frostbind.
play. Yeah, so they just
Yeah.
pass it back to you like, fine, that's fine.
Yep.
No, I love it. One of the pros of playing water there. So I do think water is a great element. I love that we're abusing the scepter. I think Lyre is a really interesting tech piece there. I'm excited to get out on the table. I'm a little disappointed, and so is Franklin, that we're not playing the giant tortoise,
Oh, I know.
but
Me too.
that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. I think this looks really cool, really amazing. I'd love to have you back in a couple weeks, maybe as a follow up. I can
Sure.
tell you how poorly I did with the list. You can tell me what new thing you're on. So Trent, is there anything people should know about? Are you going to make it out to Ontario? Will I see you there?
Oh yeah, yes, I'm going to Ascent, Ontario. I will be there. So will Cam. So it's going to be very exciting. Very much looking forward to it. I want to win one of these events at some point.
All right. Well, I'm excited for you to take it down on Tamer. I'm also, I feel morally obligated to tell people that Ascent Ontario is in Ontario, California. Trent told me this. I thought it was in Canada and I almost booked tickets. So, hey, good to know. It's going to be warmer and we don't need a passport coming from the state. So, Trent, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And until next time, everyone, cheers and
Hey,
happy
thanks for
gaming.
having me.